So you want to think like a historian. Well, maybe you may not know it yet, but I promise you the world would be better if most people thought more like historians. This is the fourth video I've done in an infrequent series titled How to Think Like a Historian. I've done previous videos on historical monographs and publishing, on dissecting primary sources, and on the concept of historiography. I've received several requests, however, to take it one step further and talk about archival research, which is going to be the focus of this video. And it's good timing for me because I just finished returning from a research trip recently on a research project I'm about to take on. I am finishing up a book right now on religion and the abolitionist movement, but soon I'm going to be embarking on a religious, political, and intellectual biography of W. Cleon Skousen, a prominent conservative thinker in Mormonism and right-wing circles in the 20th century. And I just returned from going through his voluminous papers collection at BYU. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about his papers collection as a way to introduce you to the broader world of archival digging. Let's dig in. Now, the first thing that any scholar has to do when they are embarking on a new research project is discover, is there an archival and research base that can sustain the project that I want to take? Now, of course, there are a variety of different projects you can take. You can do ones that are primarily online resources, which is frequently the case. I still like to go into brick and mortar buildings and dig into tangible sources. Every project I've taken on in the past, and I've written or edited 5 volumes, I often base on, are there primary and archival sources that can justify this digging so that I'm not just making stuff up? And so when I was thinking about taking on a new project, one of the people who came to the foreground in my mind is W. Cleon Skousen, a very prominent Mormon political and religious thinker who was at the forefront of America's anti-communist forays during the 1950s and 1960s, taught at BYU, and in many ways is the architect of modern American Christian nationalism. I'll probably do a number of videos on Skousen in the future, but let's talk about his papers project. Because the papers for W. Cleon Skousen are voluminous. They're housed at Brigham Young University. They take up over 90 linear feet of shelf space, hold dozens and dozens of cartons on multiple topics. There are subsections on his time with FBI, his time teaching at BYU, and his numerous public speaking organizations, as well as when he created the Freeman's Institute, which eventually evolved in the National Center for Constitutional Studies. There are diaries with daily diary entries of over 50 years. There are scrapbooks with letters and newspaper clippings. There are lots of his own research notes. Here, for example, on his notes on Parley Pratt's Key to the Science of Theology, an influential 19th century theological text where we can see the origins of Skousen's own thinking. We can see here his notes on his sketches on the differences between communism and U.S. history found in his lecture notes from when he taught U.S. history at BYU. Here is, speaking at BYU, the first page of his syllabus on a course that he taught for BYU's Honors College titled Priesthood, the Key to Righteous Government. And here are some of his research notes on government. There's also, in this collection, like many archival collections, lots and lots of photographs, which is a great way to see the individual in their private space and their public space. Here, for instance, is Cleon Skousen looking like a young hunk, something maybe you did not expect, but it puts flesh on the individual and it helps us to see him beyond just the public persona. Now, in this case, with Cleon Skousen, I had to get permission from the Skousen family to get access to these voluminous boxes. Thankfully, after a series of conversations with a very kind and understanding Skousen family, I was able to gain research for which I still remain grateful, and I'm excited to do even further digging. But once you've done some research and you know there is a primary source space, you've gone over the catalog, every archive should have an online catalog where you can find it laid out of all the different sections, you can go forward and start scheduling a visit. Now, there are in general 3 different types of archival repositories that you might be getting access to. There are lots of university archives. So for instance, the Cleon Skousen papers are housed at Brigham Young University. There are public archives, often those funded by states and the federal government. So in Utah, what's going to be relevant for this project is the Utah State Historical Society has lots of archives on people surrounding Cleon Skousen. And then there are private archives held by private organizations. For instance, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, their church history library in Salt Lake is also going to be a major archive that I'll be doing a lot of research in. All of these different archives have different rules, different practices, different policies. So when you find that your documents that you want to go look at are held in a particular archive, you need to do the research on what's expected. Often you have to make an appointment and tell them what documents you want to look at what day, during what time, so they can be ready. And let me state here that archivists and librarians are often the most helpful and undersung heroes of the historical enterprise. They know the sources, they are wanting to get that material in your hands, they are wanting to help. So if you can approach with a personable and kind demeanor, you're going to find that they are very, very helpful. So befriend those archivists. There's a reason why the best books, if you go to the acknowledgement sections, they will be thanking dozens of librarians and archivists who have helped them along the way. You need to build those relationships. Now, you need to do research on those institutions to know what their policies and expectations are. Many archives allow you to take photographs. Not all do, and some it might be restricted on which documents you take or what type of photographs you can take. Many allow you to take pencil and paper and to take notes. Others allow you to take computers and may have outlets in their reading room. Again, this differs by repository, so you need to do research. I remember once going to an underfunded state research institution for my first book, and they did not have any power outlets inside, so I could only do research so long as my laptop's battery survived, which, because I was a broke grad student, was not very long. Speaking of sitting down and doing a lot of research, you're going to want to wear comfortable clothes when you go into the archives because you're likely going to be sitting for hours on end. Just a couple of years ago, I was on a research fellowship in Boston where I sat in an archive for about 8 hours a day for 6 straight months. That's just the life of the historian. It's not as glamorous as Indiana Jones or Robert Langdon sometimes make it appear. It's also good to make sure you're invested in a good camera. Now, most phones now come with a good camera, so I use my iPhone, but other people learn to bring their other phones. But that's not the only thing you should think about when you're preparing. You should also go into the archives with the strategy concerning how you are going to take notes. And this is probably going to depend on your own skills, your own background, and how much time you're going to have. When I had my 6-month-long research fellowship in Boston, I made it my goal to read through all the documents and take all the notes while I was there because I had the time to digest them. I have a habit in the past of going to archives, taking lots of photographs of documents and never really returning to look at all of them. And they just sit on my desktop judging me. And so I found that when possible, I try to take notes as much as I can. So even when I was doing my research trip to BYU to look at the Cleon Skousen papers, I knew this was more of an exploratory trip. I was only going to spend about a week there in anticipation for next year or the year after when I'm going to spend extended time. So I just want to get a sense of what's there. Now, I use the application Evernote to take my notes. There are lots of great applications out there, some that require subscriptions, some don't. I find Evernote useful for me because it allows me to create new digital note cards for every box that I'm looking at. Here is a screenshot, for instance, of one of the boxes I was looking through where I'd write down what the documents are within that box, what are some key takeaways so that I know when to go back to. And I'll sometimes write see images if I have taken photographs. And when I don't have a lot of time, I take lots and lots of photographs of these sources. But that's just the first step. The second step is you need to make sure to organize those photographs, which I always do. The day that I took those photographs, I will go back to my phone and my laptop at night, and I will organize those photographs in certain files so that I'm not going to be lost. I'm still in my headspace at that moment that I'm going to lose later on. So that's one of my biggest tips I tell junior researchers is make sure to organize and take notes while it's still fresh in your mind before you lose it. Other major tip I always tell people is to immerse yourselves in the world that you are studying. When I am researching a specific period, like for instance, when I'm looking at Cleon Skousen, I will immerse myself in the world of America in the 1950s. I will be glancing over newspapers from that time. I'll be reading fiction from that time. If there are TV shows or movies from that time, I'll watch it as well in order for me to help me mentally inhabit that world. And the third major suggestion I give for people embarking in these research projects is, as the famed historian Robert Caro, who wrote the great books on Lyndon Johnson, has said, you need to turn every page. By the time I am done with the Cleon Skousen project, I will have looked at every single page in those 93 linear feet worth of cartons that are full of documents, because you never know when you're going to see a document that might explode your previous theory and lead you in new directions. So you need to prepare for your research, you need to immerse yourself in that world, and you need to turn every page. So like I said, I'll be doing future videos on Cleon Skousen, especially when I become immersed in that world, but I thought I'd give some examples from the documents that I looked at during my research trip concerning a particular topic, and that was the publication of his best-selling book, The Naked Communists, which came out in the late 1950s and sold millions of copies over the next decade, becoming one of the most popular and influential anti-communist tracts of the era, and indeed maybe one of the most important political texts of the 20th century in creating a new political movement. Again, I'll be discussing that in the future. But here are some documents that I analyzed in the Cleon Skousen papers that will help me fill out the world beyond just reading the book itself, which of course one still has to do, and which I've done if you want to understand its appeal. But first we have the diaries. Here are the first page of diaries from 1959, around the time the book was written. The diaries allow me to get into the headspace of Skousen when he was writing and publishing it. We also have early drafts of what he was working on at the time, so I can see his intellectual development over the 6 odd years in which he was working on it. We also have several later memoirs that he wrote, where he details the origins of the book and why he found it significant. Here is one memoir where he was specifically wrote out, this is why I wrote this book. And here's another memoir that specifically talks about David O. McKay, who was the LDS president at the time, and his role in promoting the book. And then we have, from another sort of documents, Cleon Skousen kept these scrapbooks in which he compiled all the letters and newspaper clippings and the responses to the Naked Communists, which allows us to tell the broader story. Here is, for instance, a letter from Dwight Eisenhower, the US president at the time, and here is one from J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director and Cleon Skousen's former boss. Skousen had sent both of them copies of the book when it came out. They ended up praising the book, which shows its broader appeal. Now, when I sit down and write this book or write the articles based on it, I will have taken all these sources, I will contextualize them, and I will dissect them in order to get behind the public story to the intellectual world that both enabled the book to be written in the first place and the mental world in which it was received. So there you have it. Those are some tips and some starter ideas if you are going to go out and do your own archival research. I hope this has been useful. If so, make sure to like and share the video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. Every Monday, I try to do deep dives on a particular historical topic. On Wednesdays, I connect history to the present, whether that be through politics or media or movies or TV shows. And then on Fridays, I take a step back and we talk about the historiographical world, either giving you recommendations of books and articles to read, or like this series does, uncover the man behind the curtain of how historians do their work. History has never been more relevant than it is in the present, which is why I believe these discussions are so important. So thanks for joining me in the journey.